Gotowe, konstrukcja.
Ale kiedy summer?
Really?
In the summer.
Shouldn't do that.
So I just wanted to get in the shade and stop having the NHS at risk.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. Yesterday.
Well, I've got suntan, sun cream. I don't care.
Not your shade. Yeah, probably. Is he here? Yeah, he is. He is here. Yeah, he does. But he hasn't today. Paul came in a quick word with David Hayward about the procurement waiver on the beam pilot, and he's okay. Just exactly the case of the objection about Christmas.
I will need, yeah, I'm very happy as a pilot, it's compliant with procurement. Yeah, I'm happy.
If we have to do something, then we'll do something.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. My name is Councillor Ben Chapler, and I'm Councillor for St James's in Tunbridge Wells, and I'm the leader of Tunbridge Wells Borough Council, and I will be chairing this evening's meeting. Welcome to the meeting of the Cabinet on Wednesday the 20th of July 2022. And before we start, please give your full attention to the following safety and broadcasting announcements.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. In the event of fire alarm ringing continuously, you must immediately evacuate the building at walking pace. Members of the staff will escort you via the most direct and available route. We will make our way to the fire assembly point, and once outside, a check will be made to ensure everyone has safely left and no one is to re-enter the building until advised that it is safe to do so. This is a public meeting and proceedings are being webcast live online. A recording will also be available for playback on the Council's website shortly afterwards. You should all be aware that any third party is able to record or film Council meetings unless exempt or confidential information is being considered. The Council will not accept any liability for any third party recordings. In order to ensure there is a continuous live stream, can I ask everyone not to connect to the Wi-Fi while we are broadcasting? It is very important that the outcomes of the meeting are clear. At the end of each agenda item, the Chair will ask whether the matter is agreed. In the absence of a clear majority, or if the Chair decides a full vote is desirable, a vote will be taken by a show of hands. Members should raise their hands to indicate their vote, and when called, and keep their hand up until the count has been announced. Members requesting a recorded vote must do so before the vote is taken. Members and members of the public who have registered to speak at the meeting will have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. For the benefit of the recording, the following members of the Cabinet are present. Councillor Luke Everett, Councillor Wendy Fitzsimmons, Councillor David Hayward, Councillor Andy Hickey, Councillor Hugo Pound, Councillor Nancy Warren, and Councillor Ben Chapler. Also present are the following members of staff. William Benson, the Chief Executive of Tunbridge Wells Borough Council, Lee Collier, Paul Taylor, Zoe Kent, John Strachan, David Candlin, Claudette Valmont, and Anne McCarthy, and Lizzie Goodwin. For the benefit of any members of the public who may be watching, I would like to explain a couple of things before we begin the meeting. Each report on the agenda today has previously been considered by relevant Cabinet Advisory Board, and the views expressed by the Board have been taken into consideration. Members of the Cabinet have had their agendas for over a week, and we've had the opportunity to study the papers and ask any factual questions of the staff ahead of the meeting. When each agenda item is being considered, the Cabinet member will provide an overview of the report. Members of staff who have written the report will be able to answer questions. We will then move into Cabinet member discussion, and I will first ask for questions before opening the floor to debate. At the end of the debate, I will ask Cabinet members to confirm that they have fully understood the matter and are content that any proposals and or actions have been fully captured. We will then proceed to the recommendations and a vote. Item number 1, announcements from the Leader of the Council. I would just like to welcome everybody to the Old School Hall in Sandhurst. This is the second stop of the Cabinet on Tour, which is a Borough Partnership's commitment to get out of Tunbridge Wells Town Hall and go and meet the communities in the borough, throughout the borough. And tonight we're in Sandhurst. So anybody on the recording who might not know where Sandhurst is, well, we're right in the southeastern corner of the borough, and we're approximately 10 miles from Rye on the English Channel. That's how far the borough of Tunbridge Wells goes. Item number 2 is apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Justine Rutland, who unfortunately cannot be here tonight as she is self-isolating due to COVID. Item number 3 is to receive declarations of interest. Does anyone have any such declarations to make? No. Thank you. Item number 4 is notification of visitors who wish to register to speak. We have Mr. Nazir Jamil to register for item 11. We have County Councillor Sarah Hamilton, Councillor Nick Blackwell, Mr. Richard Barsley, Councillor Merrill Flashman, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Atkins, Councillor Dawlings, Councillor Pope, Councillor Hill, who've all registered to speak on item 11. Item number 5 are the minutes of the meeting dated 23rd of June. Does anybody wish to make any amendments to the minutes? I did check them following last there. No? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Item number 6 is questions from councillors to the Cabinet. We have received no questions, so we'll move swiftly on to item number 7, questions from members of the public. We've had no members of the public register to speak on any of the item on questions tonight. So that moves us straight into item number 8, which are consideration of the forward plan as at the 28th of June 2022. Do members of the Cabinet have any comments? No? Okay, so we're agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to item 9, I'm going to ask Councillor David Hayward to make a statement. David.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me at the back there. My name is David Hayward. I'm the Cabinet member with responsibility for governance and transparency. And I look after the Council's processes, which includes how decisions are made. And I note tonight there are a lot of speakers for agenda item 11. And I'd like to give a short explanation of how decisions are come to by Cabinet. Now, Cabinet, just like national governments, has advisory bodies. And they are, the Cabinet is the decision makers, so the advisory bodies advise. Advisory bodies provide non-binding strategic advice to us, the Cabinet. And the one that fed our option number 11 today is the Finance and Governance Cabinet Advisory Board. Now, what has happened here is that somebody has picked up the Finance and Governance Advisory Board agenda and believed it to be a Cabinet decision. And then they've disseminated it very publicly with the appearance of a done deal. Now, no decision can possibly have been made, and the perception is that the proposed car parking fee changes would not go out to consultation, and that's disappointing. The new administration, the Borough Partnership, is very different to the previous autocratic one. So those of you that have come with impassioned pleas surrounding the parking element of item 11 will be attentively listened to. But this evening is where we will decide on the proposal for the official consultation process, long before any decision is made regarding implementation. A consultation with which I hope you will engage equally as passionately. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Item number 9 is the in-year budget review 2022-2023. And I'm going to ask Andy Hickey, Cabinet Member for Finance and Performance, to introduce the item, please.
Thank you, Ben. The in-year budget review seeks to address the forecast deficit for this year of £944,000. It is aligned with the Borough Partnership commitment to safeguard the Council's finances. It seeks to urgently, within this fiscal year, reduce the Council's expenditure, increase the Council's income, and release surplus assets for marketing and potential sale. In doing so, it provides the opportunity to release money in the near term for a much-needed community support fund to help those most challenged in the borough by the cost of living crisis. The Cabinet Advisory Board for Finance and Governance reviewed the report on the 12th of July. Arguments against the proposal were that the deficit is based on a forecast rather than actuals and is not risk adjusted for potential growth in income during the year from the Civic Centre co-working initiative, parking income growth associated with economic growth, or potential business rate growth. Those opposed felt it was better to wait and see what happens rather than increase fees and charges and cut costs now. I believe that view is complacent at best and irresponsible at worst, and that it is important to protect the vital council services over the medium to long term with action now. The Borough Partnership exists to act rather than sit on its collective hands and wait for national government largesse or a stuttering economic recovery. The in-year review was approved by the Cabinet Advisory Board with 7 members supporting the review and 2 opposing it. Lee Collier, Director of Finance, Policy and Development, will introduce the report in more detail. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. So the budget for the year 22-23 was developed against the backdrop of the Omicron variant and a banking and inflation target of 2%. That resulted in a deficit of £944,000, with increasing deficits for future years. It's worth reflecting that such deficits are quite common across local government, given the way local government is funded. Now, since then, all economic restrictions have been removed, footfall and demand for services has been recovering, and inflation is now 9.4% and forecast to reach 11%, with energy costs substantially higher. But these are macroeconomic events, but there is also a change in political administration locally, and through the signing of a borough partnership, the new administration intends to act as a matter of urgency to achieve its first priority of safeguarding the council's finances. Within the report, budget forecasts for future years have been updated, and the illustration at paragraph 2.5 shows that growing budget gap, as income is insufficient to keep pace with inflationary pressures. This is predominantly due to national council tax cap of 2%, whilst inflation now exceeds 10%, and in the case of the council's energy costs, they are running at 100%. The council cannot absorb these inflationary pressures. To ensure the continued delivery of core services, the following interventions are set out within the report: a reduction in expenditure, an increase in income, marketing of surplus assets, and establishing a community support fund. Details of changes to sales fees and charges are set out in a separate report elsewhere on the agenda. If all the proposed changes are implemented, then the budget gap for the current year will reduce to £560,000. But the real benefit from acting now is that the deficit for next year reduces from £2.6 million to £1.8 million. The revenue budget reductions, along with new capital receipts, will also stabilise the decline in council reserves, as set out in the graphic at 2.45. There may also be a need for the council to act to help bring forward properties to develop economic benefits. The first property was making the town hall available for co-working, and it is also proposed to set aside £2.5 million from that budget to fund other opportunities that would increase footfall and deliver economic activity. These are extraordinary times, and the Local Government Association have said that the underfunding of councils across England means there's an £8 billion gap across all councils, which are now in a similar position of facing deficits. Action is needed at a national level to either increase the 2% cap on council tax or give councils local freedoms to make more decisions on funding locally. The council cannot wait for the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities to set out their plans for local government funding, and the council needs to set out its own strategy and savings plan. This was also recommended by the external auditors as in their report, and it forms the first part of this council's savings plan and provides the auditors with evidence that the council has a credible and deliverable savings plan. As regards central government, to date there have been no technical papers or consultation issued by the government, or either information on a replacement for new homes bonus, a fair funding review, or the £5 district council tax cap, which has remained frozen since 2013. But the previous Secretary of State said last month that the multi-year finance settlement will now be for 2 years. It's also worth adding, Chairman, that at the Cabinet Advisory Board, the report was approved without amendment. Thank you. Thank you, Lee. Can I ask members of the Cabinet if they've got any questions for Lee at all? Thank you. I've got a question, Lee. On 2.45, which is the reserves, what the minimum reserves that the council can have is £4 million. And if we don't do something about it, we're going to go below that. What's the reason for the £4 million, and how was that figure calculated, and what would it insure us against in any event? So the £4 million was a judgment I made based around this council's risk, this council's value of services it needs to provide. So on an annual basis, this council provides £65 million worth of services, but half our services are what's called statutory services, ones we must provide for by law. So it's important to have some funds set aside to ensure that the council can continue to deliver those statutory services which are essential, and also fund a capital programme to ensure that we have the assets with which to deliver those services is from. But the council is in a relatively strong financial position in comparison with other councils. If you look at the council's balance sheet, you have options available as regards the level of assets the council has, and the council has no external debt. Okay. Thank you very much. That's it. Can I open the debate? Does anybody want to say anything at this stage? Councillor Hugo Pound.
Thank you very much. I'm also looking at 2.45, which is the usable reserves, and I note, as anyone in the here can see from the bar chart, that our usable reserves has taken a mighty dip in the last year, and we are now down to about £14 million of usable reserves. And it concerns me that isn't understood, that suddenly we have gone down significantly in the last year. And it concerns me that many people don't understand that trajectory is going to continue unless we address it now. And I understand that an awful lot of people have spoken to me saying, why don't we just put it off for another 6 months? You know, we don't know what the economy might look like in 6 months' time. And the truth is, we don't know what the economy will look like in 6 months' time. It may be worse than it is now. And my view is that if you put things off, you know, until we know what the future looks like, you never do anything. And it could be accused or challenged that is what the last administration did. They put things off and never did anything. And my view is that we need to address the crisis that we potentially could be facing in the future. And I think that bar chart on the usable reserves reinforces that message more than almost anything else.
Thank you, Hugo. Does anybody else want to say anything on this item? No? In terms of putting things off, I'd like to just add that currently the deficit for this financial year is £944,000. If we don't do anything about it, by 2026, that deficit will have risen to £3.5 million. That's an enormous amount, and we have to act now if we are to protect the council services that residents tell us they value. Okay, so if there are no other comments, I'm going to move on to the recommendations. So recommendation 1 is that Cabinet approve the in-year budget revisions and the direction of travel in setting the budget for 2023-2024 with the aim of rebalancing the council's finances over the medium term. Recommendation 2, Cabinet delegate to the head of economic development and property in consultation with the Cabinet member for finance and performance authority to commence listing for potential disposal or lease of the following surplus assets. Number 1, Mount Pleasant Avenue car park. Number 2, Great Hall car park. Number 3, the Gateway. And number 4, land at Warwick Park. Recommendation number 3, Cabinet delegate authority to the head of finance, procurement and parking in consultation with a Cabinet member for rural communities and deputy leader of Tunbridge Wells Borough Council to produce terms of reference for operating a community support fund. Recommendation 4, Cabinet approved a vehement of £2.5 million from the Town Hall conversion budget to the asset acquisition budget to further the economic development of the town centre through the acquisition and or redevelopment of property. The Director of Finance, Property and Development be given delegated authority to negotiate and agree terms to enter into contracts using this budget in consultation with the monitoring officer and the Cabinet members for finance and performance and the Cabinet member for Tunbridge Wells Town Centre and local areas. And fifthly, Cabinet delegate to the heads of legal partnership authority to negotiate and complete all necessary agreements, deeds and documents arising or ancillary to the purchase and or refurbishments on terms negotiated and agreed. So my question to members of the Cabinet, are we agreed?
We're agreed.
Thank you very much. We're now going to move on to item 10, which is a draft council tax reduction scheme for 2023-2024. And I'm going to ask Councillor Andy Hickey, Cabinet Member for Finance and Performance, to introduce the item.
Thank you, Ben. The Council Tax Reduction Scheme provides help for borough residents who are on low incomes by reducing the amount of council tax that they must pay. The scheme was simplified in 2020 to address complexities resulting from, among other things, the introduction of universal credit. This item proposes the continuation of the scheme in its current form for another year. There was unanimous support for the draft Council Tax Reduction Scheme at the Cabinet Advisory Board for Finance and Governance. Additionally, the Advisory Board asked that the Community Support Fund, which will be created as part of the in-year budget review, is targeted, where possible, at as many of those households that qualify for council tax reduction as possible. The Advisory Board asked that benefits officers work with the finance team to understand the best way to identify these households for support via the fund through appropriate agencies, which will in turn be identified by the Grant Assessment Panel. Zoe Kent, Revenue and Benefits Manager, will introduce the report in more detail.
Thank you. In 2013, the Council Tax Reduction Scheme was brought in to replace Council Tax Benefit as a new localised support scheme. The current banded scheme, awarding a maximum of 80% support to working age claimants, is consistent with the other councils in the West Kent housing market area. This is the second year of the banded scheme, and it may be advisable for this scheme to be in place for at least 2 full years before any changes to the scheme are made. A detailed discussion took place at the Cabinet Advisory Board, members' questions were answered and the report was approved.
Thank you. Sorry. Does any member of Cabinet have any questions for Zoe Kent, please? No? Okay, I'll open the debate. Does anybody wish to? I just want to clarify one point, which is Andy has mentioned that there is a community support fund. As part of the previous item, we are trying to raise up to £100,000 to support the neediest and poorest members of the borough as we head towards the autumn and the winter, as we know that inflation is continuing to rise. And I think that's an important part of our belief that we need to act locally as a local council for the benefit of those residents who are in need. So we're hoping to raise up to £100,000 under the Community Support Fund to help those residents. Okay, so if nobody wants to, go for it.
Just to thank you, Chair. The Labour Group has for years campaigned for the council tax support package to be looked at in order to try and give more support to some of our most vulnerable residents and those who need that the most. To see in this report today that option 3 is to part of the outcome of this is to recognise the challenging circumstances faced by many local residents and look at other ways in which they can be supported with the cost of housing and living is, for me, fantastic to read, and it shows that this council is taking seriously some of the strain that people are under in this cost of living crisis. And I think it's great that the Borough Partnership recognises this, and it's actually going to take some action to help those who need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Councillor Pound.
If I may, Hugo Pound again, if I may just add to what my colleague Luke has said, the Labour Group has, as Luke has said, for years objected to the council tax reduction scheme only providing a reduction of 80% to those individuals and families who are on the highest levels of universal credit. And we have been advised that this causes enormous complexities if we were to withdraw from the agreed scheme across all of the other districts in Kent, that it would cost us payments from Kent County Council for the way in which we administer the service currently. It would cost Kent taxpayers money because we would not be raising as much tax as we should be. But the Labour position still remains that essentially we do not believe that people on the highest levels of universal credit should be paying council tax, which to most people here, I suspect, means nothing. But if you're having to find £4 or £5 a week, even at 20%, that is a significant sum for some people. So next year, as we go into the debate on this very subject, we will again be trying to seek confirmation that the council tax reduction scheme will be addressed fully in the manner that Luke has just addressed.
Andy, can I just bring you in to just confirm that we'll be reviewing this in a year's time?
Yes, we will do. That's the process.
Thank you. Okay, so if nobody else wants to speak, can I move to the recommendations on item 10? Recommendation number 1, that the Cabinet Advisory Board notes the progress of the income banded council tax reduction scheme. Recommendation 2, that the Cabinet Advisory Board recommends no changes are made to the council tax reduction scheme for 2023-2024 for the reasons stated in the report. Recommendation 3, that the council seeks to provide support for those struggling on low incomes and with the cost of living crisis through the establishment of a community support fund, details of which are set out in the report elsewhere on this agenda under the in-year budget review item and through use of the household support fund. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are moving on to item 11, which is the sales fees and charges, including car parking for the year 2022-2023. We're going to start this item with listening to our 10 registered speakers on this item. Each speaker has been given 3 minutes to speak and address the Cabinet. We will be, of course, listening, but if you see us writing anything down, it's just we're taking notes of the points you've made. The first person that registered to speak is Mr. Nazir Jamil. If you'd like to come up, sir. There's a seat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very happy to see lots of my fellow residents from Southborough and Tunbridge Wells in here. Hello, everyone. Hi. Should I sit down or stand?
As you wish, sir.
I will stand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Nazir Jamil and I'm a resident of Southborough. Today I'm here to speak on behalf of the residents and businesses of Southborough and Tunbridge Wells. In response to the agenda item 11, the residents are very much concerned and shocked to learn the proposal by this coalition council to remove free 2 hours of parking at Duty Road car park and free 1 hour at Paddockwood car park. Residents have strongly rejected this proposal by expressing their anger and by signing online petitions, which have already received more than 4,000 signatures combined. And even the last Saturday, they physically came out to protest against this proposal, regardless of the short notice and scorching heat. The residents oppose this proposal on 3 important grounds. Huge impact on businesses. It will have a detrimental impact on local businesses because they actually use this free parking as an incentive to their marketing strategy to attract more customers. By removing this free period, will damage their businesses and might end up closing. For example, a shop in Southborough called Running Hub, they sell running shoes. Customers for this shop come from Hastings, Eastbourne, Crossbridge, Hayward Heath, attracted by the free car parking over closer but less accessible competition. We need the small businesses in our town to attract more customers if they are to be vibrant and attractive. More people will shop in person rather than online or drop in for coffee without the hassle and expense to pay. Also, it will be a financial mistake. Empty shops eventually cost the council more money by loss of business rates as compared to the revenue from the small car parks. Council must look into some other alternative to raise funds if required, not choose the easy target of raising parking fees, which will damage the vitality of our towns. Number 2, the impact on local services. U-Tree car park is a lifeline to many local services, including the patients of GP surgery, patients of newly opened physio center, or a dental practice which is opening soon, and a busy chemist shop. It will also discourage users and visitors of the library, a new library, a Southborough Town Council office, and a newly built community hall, which is already struggling to get more bookings. It is not right to charge people for using these community services. Number 3, the impact on neighborhood. During the football season, it will encourage parents of the young football to park their cars on the neighborhood streets, which will create havoc.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm just winding up. Okay. On last point. So therefore, we the residents strongly believe that this is an error and the council must drop this proposal in the best interest of the people which are already here from Southborough and Tunbridge Wells. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kent County Councillor Sarah Hamilton.
I will actually sit down because I have a long day. Thank you. Thank you, Leader. As you've mentioned, I'm the Kent County Councillor for Tunbridge Wells Rural, and I'm here to speak about Hayward car parks. I do not need to repeat what's already been said and what's going to be said, but it goes without saying I support the concerns already expressed to you and your Cabinet. Thank you for your personal response to my letter. It was appreciated, Leader, and I'm pleased to read that your administration is listening to the concerns of residents and I hope businesses. I note the earlier address by the member about consultation, but is this perhaps backpedaling because no one seemed to know that? Availability of car parking is one of the factors known very well to affect businesses in town centres. The others are the internet and out-of-town facilities. Paddock Wood Town Centre is fragile, and given the changes in market forces, more so. We've all worked very hard on this over the years. After that hard work, a compromise was reached of 1 hour free, when 2 would be preferable, really. All this might be a valuable source of income to the borough, but our businesses are valuable too, very valuable. Many come to Paddock Wood from outside areas to support our shops. I know because I've spent time asking people in the town centre over the years. Our businesses rely on visitors to the area. I ask, Leader, that you and your cabinet stand by your own pledges. Vibrant towns and villages, transparency and local democracy, and you engage openly and properly with the residents, businesses and town council to protect and develop vibrancy in the town centre. I ask that your administration stands by its pledges, particularly that of local democracy, and engage properly with our residents before, not after, people complain. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next registered speaker is Councillor Nick Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to stay if that's okay with you. Good evening. My name is Nick Blackwell. I'm a Southborough Town Councillor. I'm speaking regarding the proposed removal of the 2 free hours of parking in YouTube Road car park. I understand that no decision has yet been taken on this. I can understand why these proposals have been put forward. I've seen the projections on the borough's finances, and I do understand the urgency with which councillors are moving to protect vital services and safeguard the financial health of the borough council. At Southborough too, we're dealing with a legacy of financial mismanagement from the previous administration and are having to take difficult decisions to balance the budget. However, I do feel in this instance, consultation with residents has been missing, communication has been poor, and decision-making has been rushed. The proposed loss of the 2 hours free parking would have an impact that outweighs the expected modest income. The viability of our new town centre and our already struggling high street relies on this provision. Access to the medical centre, library, sports provision, childcare drop-off, they all depend on the 2 hours free parking. And we've been here before. For those with short memories, the previous Conservative administration has already tried to impose charges on the YouTube Road car park, and the result was chaos. Parked cars ended up on YouTube Road in Crendon Park. Emergency vehicles were unable to access side roads. We had congestion on the roads and an empty car park. It certainly isn't the income earner that you expect it will be. At that time, Southborough Town Council persistently lobbied and campaigned for the 2 hours free car parking, and eventually we got it. It was a key factor in the viability of our new town centre. We know how vital it is to making our town work. I expect you are now fully aware of the strength of feeling on this issue and will carefully consider your next steps to engage the public on this. You ignore public opinion at your peril. Demolition of the Royal Victoria Hall, the folly of the Calverley Square Theatre, we don't forget, and it never ends well for our elected representatives. I am therefore reassured that no decision will take place on car park charges until a full public consultation has taken place, including with councillors at our council and our local residents. Although I am puzzled why no one's mentioned a public consultation in any of the emails that have been flying around in the last week. At Southborough, we will be calling a town meeting to make sure our residents' views on this are crystal clear. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Meryl Flashman.
When the Cabinet was appointed, Councillor Chapelard stated that the new administration wanted to listen to and relentlessly engage with residents and businesses, with community engagement being one of the Cabinet's top priorities. Local democracy and vibrant centres were also part of the 5 key principles. Paddock Wood Town Council is telling you that it strongly objects to the proposal to remove the free parking facility from our car parks. We are supported by the Business Association, our 4 borough councillors and our county councillor, not to mention an electronic petition and a paper petition. There is very strong feeling about the retention of free parking. This is local democracy in action. There has been no consultation on this proposal, and we only found out about it because of our borough councillors. When our free parking was reduced from 2 hours to 1, we were told it was so that maintenance could be done without it impinging on the Tunbridge Wells Borough Council budget. I can recall very little maintenance beyond hedge trimming being done in the car park since that review. Issues relating to the car park, which have been reported by Paddock Wood Town Council, have not been dealt with. Why should support for the new EBCs be passed on to residents of Paddock Wood? We were informed last year by Councillor Bailey, a former Cabinet member, that EBCs were going to be installed as part of the KCC initiative using government funds. Presumably users of the charging points will be paying, which will cover any expenses likely to be incurred by TWBC. The 2 car parks in Paddock Wood are so centrally located, and removing the 1 hour free parking will deter residents from visiting the town, which will not help local trade. The CAB report does not take into consideration illegal parking in Commercial Road, about which TWBC has been lobbied for many years. Better enforcement of existing rules is required. Charging for the first hour will only make this problem worse. Already at busy times, illegal parking in Paddock Wood brings Commercial Road to a standstill. If you must persist, please carry out a proper consultation so that you fully understand the implications of what you are planning. This needs to involve all residents of Paddock Wood and the surrounding area and shouldn't take place over the summer period when many people are away. 50p in central Tunbridge Wells may not be a high cost to park, but in a small rural town it is expensive. People often stop only for 5 or 10 minutes on a daily basis. Finally, I remind you of your promises to listen to residents of the rural areas and to keep our town centre vibrant. Your proposal will increase illegal parking and drive residents elsewhere to shop. Please reconsider.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Richard Barsley.
Good evening. I'm Richard Barsley, Chair of the Paddock Business Association. We are stunned by this sudden proposal to increase parking charges in Paddock Wood, and at very short notice. We dispute the Council's claim of no change in usage since tariffs were altered in 2017. The charge times were changed, therefore it cannot be compared. These changes affected dwell time dramatically. We surveyed our members a year later and it showed a decline in footfall and turnover around 10 to 25%, even one case of 45%. Business reported customers' comments of, I can't stop, I've got to get back to the car, I need to go, my parking's running out. Dwell time is crucial to businesses in the town. Your advisory report states you aim to promote dwell time. Customers lack the incentive for more considered shopping or just have a coffee and a snack. Commercial Road is regularly very congested due to illegal parking. If your charges were introduced from arrival, many more people would park illegally. Current enforcement is farcical and counterproductive. Anyone a little over in the official car park gets a ticket immediately, whereas illegal parkers are given 2 minutes by the wardens until they act. Why are they allowed to get away with this? We rarely see this in any other bigger towns. Also, how can you justify 75% increase on the second hour in Paddock Wood? Paddock Wood has a good but delicate economy. There are no vacant shops. The only one empty one is under offer. We need to nurture and save this fragile economy. Our footfall was falling pre-COVID and is now much worse. If we do not get your support, we will see business closures. This is false economy. Think of the loss of other revenue streams. It will be much greater than anything significant from parking charges. No one needs to park in an empty town. The petition showing the strength of public feeling on this is overwhelming. There's been over 1,500 online signatures. On Monday, we sent over 1,100 paper signatures, and I have today collected a further 509 signatures in the last 36 hours. Please listen. Over 3,000 voices from the community that voted you in to serve them. In conclusion, please consult widely on giving us good notice. Make the first 2 hours free and increase charges for longer stay. Work with us together in the community to make this work. And we would welcome your claims to work in partnership with the community. Please prove it by consulting with us on this type of dramatic change. Keep our streets clear of illegal parking, support our local economy and save our town centre. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Barsley. Our next speaker is Councillor Matt Bailey.
I'm Matt Bailey, I'm one of the Borough Councillors of Hayward West. I appreciate that councils around the country are having to look at ways of raising new revenue in this inflationary and post-COVID world. However, I believe that parking pricing that's been proposed by Cabinet will have a serious and detrimental impact on the very groups the council should be supporting in these difficult times. Our residents already face surging prices and rising interest rates. The situation will worsen, with the energy price cap likely to rise by a further £1,200 in October, and interest rates expected to more than double over the remainder of the year. Our local high streets are struggling as consumers cut back. Footfall in shopping areas is currently 20% lower than in 2019, and likely to remain substantially below pre-COVID levels for the foreseeable future. Given this climate, Tunbridge Wells Borough Council should not be doing anything that hurts low-income households or makes life even more difficult for high street businesses. The parking price hikes proposed by Cabinet do exactly that. In Paddock Wood, the current 1 hour free parking is being abolished and the charge for the second hour is rising by 75%. This will discourage residents from visiting the town centre and will push others to park in nearby residential streets. It will also lead to more illegal street parking that already blights Commercial Road and will make the environment more dangerous for pedestrians and more hazardous for other drivers. Ironically, the reasons why free parking should be protected are contained in this report. The free parking in the Johns Road car park in Tunbridge Wells is being kept, and the report states on page 73 that the car park is aimed at short-stay shoppers and supports shops in the locality. While I fully agree that free parking should be kept at the Johns Road car park, exactly the same rationale applies to the car parks in Paddock Wood and in Southborough. So I'm at a loss to understand why free parking is being protected in St John's in Tunbridge Wells, while being abolished at identical car parks elsewhere in the borough. So I disagree with the proposed increases in parking fees in the strongest possible terms. I feel they are exactly the wrong measures being introduced at exactly the wrong time. They are due to start in October, just as energy prices take another lurch upwards. They will hurt low-income households and local high street businesses that are already going through a very tough time. And they are widely opposed by the people of Paddock Wood and by many, many other people in the borough, including our MP and the Federation of Small Businesses in Kent. They can all see the very real damage these price hikes will bring. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Matt, when you say John's Road car park, do you mean John Street car park, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Rodney Atkins.
all sit down. Thank you very much. I support everything that Councillors Fleshman, Hamilton and Bailey have said, and also Richard Barnsley about the Padwood car parks. Rather than repeating what they have said, I've got two questions actually. Firstly, I am pleased now that the Borough Partnership will put this out to consultation. But the two questions I have is, I wonder if you could explain exactly what form this consultation will take, and also what will now happen to the petitions, which have reached over 1,000 signatures, and according to the Tunbridge Wells Borough Constitution, should now go to full council for debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. We'll answer those questions in the next part of the meeting. Our next speaker is Councillor Tom Dawlings.
Thank you, Ben. Many comments during the election campaign and the last full council meeting, and some again tonight, about the state of the council's finances failed to acknowledge that we were emerging from a national health emergency in which lockdown significantly impacted on the council's main source of income from fees and charges for council services. The true position is the council's draft account for the year to 31st of March 2022 shows a small revenue surplus was achieved in that year. At the year end, the council had no borrowings, cash reserves, and 132 million of mainly property assets, an increase of 7 million in the year. As Lee Collier has just advised, the external auditor's value for money report included the actions taken during the pandemic placed the council in a strong financial position. When presenting the budget back in February, we considered we needed to see how the council's income recovered before making significant financial decisions. Income is recovering. In April and May, car park revenue exceeded the budget forecast by over £50,000. We all want to see increased footfall in the town centre, and since its opening, the Amelia Scott is attracting an average of 925 visitors a day. This increased revenue, already being generated, together with the council's share of new business rates, I expect will cover any revenue shortfall in the current financial year. In the following year, the plans for co-working in the town hall will also significantly improve the council's financial position. That was also not mentioned when Ben spoke about the medium-term financial position of the council. The inconvenient truth for Cabinet is the council's finances are not in a mess, and the presentation of an emergency budget is more like showboating. Growing inflationary pressures should be addressed as part of the continuing financial management of the council and the well-trodden process for preparing and consulting on a budget for 23-24. Raising charges that will discourage visitors and adversely affect businesses is straightforwardly a mistake. Despite your borough partnership's commitment to being open and consultative, I do not detect any evidence of consultation on car park charges with residents or businesses or with affected parishes like Southborough and Paddock Wood. Your proposal to introduce charges from Dunloran I don't think was even mentioned at the Friends of Dunloran, but seemingly you are now intending to consult, so thank you. I think most insensitively, you seem to be overlooking that many household budgets are now being squeezed by the cost of living crisis. Your proposal will add to that quite unnecessarily. The Conservative group will vigorously oppose you adding to the cost of living pressures on residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Our next speaker is Councillor Nick Pope.
Not sure I've come appropriately dressed. Good evening, I'm Nicholas Pope. I'm an Alliance Councillor for Park Ward in Royal Tunbridge Wells. I was in France visiting my parents-in-law when the Finance and Governance Cabinet Advisory Board agenda papers were released and was surprised by some of the proposed parking charges. I fully appreciate the need to deal with the deficit and the desire of the Borough Partnership to act fast. It is important that all fees and all charges are considered. Nothing is so sacred that it should not be looked at and considered in detail. It is also important that stakeholders are consulted and their feedback considered fully and in detail before a decision is made. Tunbridge Wells Borough Council is too reliant on income from car parks and needs to use other sources and find other sources. Car parking charges encourage illegal, inconsiderate and dangerous parking. This can be seen in Paddock Wood now and across Tunbridge Wells. Another source of income that needs to be considered is parking enforcement, related but different. I understand that it is not a fee or charge and therefore not being considered today, but I ask Cabinet to consider this income stream and how it can be increased and utilised to help deal with the deficit. Currently, the Council issues over £1 million worth of parking tickets, and around half of this is spent on running enforcement, leaving just over £500,000. There is room to improve and increase parking enforcement. Additional money raised could be used on improving car parking facilities in the borough. Parking enforcement hits those who park illegally, inconsiderately or dangerously. It hits those who choose to park their car on double yellow lines and zigzag lines at pedestrian crossings. Too often they get away with it and they block traffic flow and put pedestrians and other road users at risk. Parking enforcement doesn't require the installation of new parking machines, and it doesn't hit those parking in car parks and in on-street bays. Increasing parking enforcement may require additional staff or additional overtime to increase the income, or even additional technology. However, enforcement can be ramped up quickly and increased further over time. I am sure a 20% increase in income is achievable. That's about £100,000 after costs. Or even a 40% increase is possible. That would be about £200,000. Better parking enforcement will encourage people to use car parks, park more considerately, and make our towns and villages more pleasant to live in. Badly and illegally parked cars are a menace, and the numbers have been increasing, and the more people get away with it, the worse it will get. Removing free periods of car parking in car parks will encourage more bad and illegal parking and not generate the income projected. So, give me a uniform. When can I start?
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Diane Hill, please.
Hello everyone. Okay. With the new borough partnership, we were hoping for a new relationship where Tunbridge Wells started listening to the villages and towns. Sadly, these proposals indicate otherwise. As the Chair and Mayor of South Town Council, I find it unbelievable that no one thought it important to notify us or our residents about the loss of our free 2 hours parking, or to understand the implications to our town. I have here a statement from our businesses in Southborough. Southborough traders suffer from being in the car park corridor of the A26. They suffered through lockdown and are mostly small independent traders. We are desperately trying to get footfall into Southborough. We've even got together to put on our own events under Southborough Street Community, out of our own pockets. These take place in various places around Southborough, including the new town square. To scrap the 2 hour free parking would be disastrous for the small, local, independent businesses in an already fragile commercial environment. The reported increase in commercial vehicles does not seem to be evident, as there is a barrier at the car park to prevent larger vehicles entering. Any commercial vehicles to the Civic Centre park the other side of it, not in Yew Tree Road car park. Parking charges were originally introduced in Yew Tree Road to support High Street customers by preventing commuters parking there all day. You are now doing the opposite. And I have another here from our litter picking group. Southborough SOS started 5.5 years ago to help improve the look of Southborough. During that time, we have regularly litter picked Yew Tree Road car park, cleared fly tipping, clearing human waste, used condoms and sanitary ware, and nappies, at least 4 times a week. We have created and planted the car park garden with shrubs and flowers funded by SOS. We cleared a van load of rubbish of fly tipping, including human waste, when the travellers were evicted a few years ago. All this would have cost Tunbridge Wells Borough Council a fortune. We have cleared some 10,000 sacks of litter in the past 5.5 years, 1,350 so far this year from our streets. We meet for group litter picks in Yew Tree Road car park. So these car park charges would mean we would have to pay for the privilege of saving Tunbridge Wells Borough Council a fortune in street cleaning alone. So, as shown here, our community worked hard and saved money for the borough. This goodwill will be severely challenged. We are all confused as to why you pick on parking charges as an easy hit, and yet, where is the enforcement for fly tipping, litter picking, etc.? These are the people that you should be looking towards to raise funds. So, I say to you, South Town Council are happy to hold a public meeting for you to attend, discuss and listen to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. We've had 10 speakers on item 11, and I may disagree with some of the points that have been made. We may disagree with some points that have been made, but I'd like to thank everybody for making the effort and coming to raise those points with us in public in a positive and constructive way, and we're grateful. We're now going to open the agenda item, and I'm going to ask Councillor Andy Hickey in Councillor Justine Rutland's absence to introduce item 11, sales fees and charges, including car park for 2022-2023.
Thank you, Ben. To support the Borough Partnership's initiative to safeguard the Council's finances, and in the light of the forecast deficit for this year, the report proposes various changes to fees and charges starting in October this year. The Council cannot go on absorbing increased costs in an inflationary environment without addressing its income streams. The report proposes increases in charges for crematorium services, green waste collection, hourly parking, car park season tickets, residence permits and visitor parking vouchers. It also proposes the introduction of parking charges in Dunollen Park. Some of these charges have not been varied since 2012 and many others have not been varied since 2017. The income from sales, fees and charges is being inflated away. The Council's costs to maintain the car parks and other public amenities are inflating. The arithmetic demands action. The Cabinet Advisory Board for Finance and Performance reviewed the reports on the 12th of July. The introduction of 50p for the first hour of parking in Paddock Wood attracted 4 speakers, including 4 local councillors and the head of the Paddock Wood Business Association and local retail owner, all have been spoken today. They expressed concern that this change will impact local retail footfall and encourage inconsiderate parking on yellow lines, pavements and in other areas of the town. There was also concern expressed that there has been a lack of public consultation. The view was expressed that, given that Cranbrook runs its car park and pays business rates to keep parking free, might the same be done for Paddock Wood and Southborough. There was also a request that the introduction of charging in Dunollen Park be deferred and included in the budget process for 2022-23, which will undergo a full consultation. John Strachan, parking manager, will introduce the report in more detail and with a specific focus on parking charges. And Mr. Chair, if it's okay for John to hand back to me at the end of this.
Of course.
Yes. John,
thank you, Councillor. Chairman. The report deals with the Council's discretionary charges. Price changes proposed are focused on those areas where costs have increased substantially and should be passed on to the consumer under the Council's policy of user pays, and where prices have not been increased in line with inflation for many years, and these are the various parking charges. It is proposed that the cost of cremations is increased by £25, which reflects the energy cost increases experienced to date. It is proposed to increase the annual garden waste charge from £52 to £56. The £52 fee was set back in 2019 when the service began, and the £4 increase reflects the indexation paid to the contractor for this service. Paying display parking charges has not been raised for over 5 years. It is proposed to increase the price of short-term parking in line with inflation over that period, but to keep the prices a little lower and not for longer parking periods, which simplifies the pricing structure and aims to encourage dwell time. There are 2 new charges proposed, these being 50p for the first hour in Paddock Wood and 50p for the first 2 hours in Yew Tree Road Car Park. Both of these sessions have been free thus far, but rising costs, especially the maintenance and business rates, have necessitated the raising of additional income from these car parks. It's proposed to increase the car park season ticket charge by around 5%. The prices are set below inflation and try to help those who need to come to work in Tunbridge Wells. Resident season tickets to parking car parks have been increased a similar amount. The report proposes the introduction of charges to park at Dunollen Park, as is common throughout Kent. The charges are laid out in Appendix A in the report, but are lower than those in other town centre car parks. This is intended to support the costs associated with maintaining the car park and the park itself. It's interesting to note that in Ashdown Forest, they are soon to introduce charges into all of their car parks, which has previously been free. Resident permits and visitor vouchers haven't been increased since 2017. Some have not been increased since 2012. A flat 10p increase for the resident permits is proposed. An increase of 15p per day is proposed for a visitor permit. A full day's parking permit will increase to £1.65 and a half day to £1.10. These changes will provide £728,000 per year to help bridge the budget deficit and support the services that we provide for parking, with a £364,000 contribution this year. This report also asks Cabinet to delegate to the Director of Finance, Policy and Development the ability to implement increases to planning fees for major and minor applications. It is understood that these charges are soon to be introduced by Government, and it would be helpful to be able to implement these as soon as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Andy, I'm coming back to you.
Yeah, thank you, John. That's great. The Cabinet notes the significant interest in this item, and in specifically the parking charges, and that's represented by all here today. Given this, I propose that all the items on parking charges in the schedule will be subject to a 4-week consultation period, starting on or around Monday the 25th of July. I propose also that the Dunollen parking charges are subject to a separate consultation, the date for which is to be determined, and are therefore not currently included in the charging schedule. The determination of the car parking charges will be made by Cabinet after the consultation periods for implementation by the 1st of October 2022.
Thank you. Before I open the debate, does any Cabinet member have any questions of John Strachan about the report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You've heard talk about the enforcement in Paddock Wood from many residents. Is there anything that you're likely to do in future to improve matters with regard to the illegal parking in Paddock Wood?
Thank you, Chairman. We have had difficulty enforcing in Paddock Wood and other outlying areas during the pandemic to secure staff safety and help prevent transmission of COVID between staff members. They could only go in one single vehicle individually, whereas previously there'd be two members of staff in a vehicle. We've re-implemented 2 members of staff in a vehicle, so we can now deploy 2 people to Paddock Wood when they go there, and that's almost each day, if not each day. And 1 member of staff will go into the car parks and another will go into Commercial Road and the on-street areas. So we will see an improvement in the parking enforcement as we return to normal operations. And the other thing I would say is that in addition to regular patrols, we can provide responsive enforcement patrols. We're easily accessible on the telephone or by email, and we can react to those requests.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. We've had 10 speakers and we've had one report laid out. Does anybody, members of the Cabinet, wish to make any comments? Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It always seems to be me who speaks first, I'm sorry. Often the way. I've written almost 2 pages of notes, and I'm not going to go through them all, but I've just underlined some very pertinent comments that I think I want people to acknowledge that we've heard. The first one was engage properly before, not after people complain. I think we've heard that, and that's valid. The enforcement issue that David Hayward has just raised cropped up a number of times, and I think that we have heard that too, and it needs to be explored. I think I'm just gobsmacked, I suppose, by the comments from the previous leader of the council, Conservative leader of the council. When we are here as a borough partnership addressing an issue which hasn't been addressed since 2017, there have been no rises in car parking charges since 2017. And therefore, the reality is that we need to address it in some way. Whether we have done it in the right way, it clearly is questionable, but the matter has to be addressed, and it clearly wasn't addressed by the previous administration. And I find it extraordinarily frustrating that buses aren't available, housing in the middle of towns isn't available, support in other forms other than that which we have done is not available for people going through the cost of living crisis. And I think it's just an absolute nonsense to say that we are not helping and supporting communities. We are trying to do so. The last comment that I've underlined significantly, and I will talk to the speaker afterwards, is give me a uniform, when can I start? Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo.
I'd like to say something, actually.
Okay.
I thank you all for coming out today and for expressing your thoughts about this, because I think it is really, really important, this idea that as communities and the council that we can work together to find a solution. And by coming here today and saying what you've said, you've opened the door for that to happen, so I thank you very much. And I apologise as well, but it appears like we're trying to rush something through without consulting. I think that's wrong. We've heard you loud and clear, and we'll do our best to do better in the future. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you.
Okay.
Would anybody else like to say anything on that item? No? I would just like to say that we have inherited Tunbridge Wells Borough Council after 24 years of successive administrations by a different party. The facts are that we have a deficit of £944,000 this year, rising to 2026 to £3.5 million. If we continue raiding the savings account from the reserves, we will run out of reserves and hit the £4 million mark that I asked Lee Collier about. We cannot afford not to act if we are to protect council services that residents have come to expect, but also tell us they value in that time. But let me also reassure you that there is nothing in this administration that we would put in jeopardy the local economy. I think that's a very important point to make. We are not seeking to damage local businesses in any way whatsoever. I know from the evidence that we've been given in the report that when we've done reduced Sunday car parking, or fees were put up the 2 previous occasions, that did not have an effect on footfall. And that view is confirmed in this document here, which is called Assessing the Impact of Car Parking Charges on town centre footfall. And that was produced at the request of the Welsh Government based on their research. And it is a lot more complex than actually parking charges equals footfall. Actually, what really matters is footfall. So when Mr. Jamil says somebody's driving from Hastings to go to the trainer shop on the A26, those pairs of trainers must be seriously good to drive all that way to there. Yeah, they are bespoke. So therefore, the 50p is not the deal that's going to break the camel's back. I think that needs to be reminded. The other thing is, we live in a misconception created after the Second World War that the car is a link to the prosperity after the devastation of the Second World War. And that misconception is still pervasive in our society. Those societies that have actually acknowledged that the car isn't the solution to everything have done the research, and there is a huge body of evidence that says that actually motorists aren't the people who return to town centres as frequently as they claim they do, and that they're not the biggest spenders. And one of those reasons, and that is very intriguing, and that is why, at no cost to the taxpayer, next month I will be going to Holland to meet with the Dutch Cycling Embassy to see what they are doing to increase footfall in their areas and their towns and their villages, to understand what it is that makes them so successful and their high street so successful. So I just want to reassure residents that we're not trying to jeopardise businesses. We are trying to save the council from being in a very, very serious position where we will not be able to deliver council services because of the legacy that we have inherited. The third point is that we have listened, and there will be a public consultation, as Andy Hickey has said, over the next 4 weeks. And I hope that everybody will take part constructively in that discussion and provide alternatives about how we fund the council services and protect them going forward. So I would very much welcome the creative juices of our community to try and find some solutions if parking charges is not the solution. That would be my 3 points from this discussion. Wendy Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make it clear to everybody that Councillor Chapter is not going to Holland on council funds. It's a perfectly private trip. I'm sorry, I didn't want that misconception to go forward.
No, I think I said that. I am going on a private visit at no cost to the taxpayer. It's been organised by the Dutch Cycling Embassy in the UK for me to go to the Netherlands and have a look at that. Yes, Luke.
I just also wanted to thank everyone who's come to speak tonight, and also anyone who has contacted me in the up-run to this meeting. I just want to inform you that your views have informed the basis of the discussion we've been having as Cabinet. So I do want to thank you for getting in touch. I also, from my perspective, just want to reiterate, I think it's excellent there's going to be a consultation, and I want the outcome of that consultation to lead the decision that will be made. I think it has to be led by the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? No. Can I ask the Chief Executive, Andy Hickey's made a recommendation on point, so do we add that to point 5?
You just add it as an additional recommendation.
Okay. Yeah. I'll come back to you now. You can read it if that's okay. So we're going to move to the recommendations. Recommendation number 1, that Cabinet agrees the sale prices, fees and charges set out within the report and attached appendices A to D, F, G and H, and delegates authority to the Section 151 officer to make any necessary amendments. Recommendation 2, that Cabinet agrees for the price increases to be implemented on the 1st of October 2022, unless stated otherwise in the report. Recommendation 3, that Cabinet delegates to the Director of Finance, Policy and Development the ability to implement increases to planning fees for major and minor applications as soon as the government permits. Recommendation 4, that Cabinet delegates to the Director of Finance, Policy and Development the ability to implement increases to the 1 hour and 2 hour parking charges in Torrington Road car park following legal advice on the price ceilings included in the lease. Recommendation 5, Andy Hickey, if you could read those out.
That all items on parking charges in the schedule will be subject to a 4-week consultation starting on or around Monday, 25th of July, and that the Genolan parking charges are subject to a separate consultation, the date for which is to be determined, and they are therefore not included within this report. The determination on car parking will be made by Cabinet after the consultation periods for implementation by the 1st of October.
Thank you. So I'll put the matter to the vote. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're moving on to item 12, which is the Shared Prosperity Fund Investment Plan. In Justine Rutland's absence, I will present the report, and just to say that the... Thank you for coming.
Pause for a couple of minutes.
I'm going to pause while people leave the room.
That's a bit sad,
really. I'll start again. Item 12, Shared Prosperity Fund Investment Plan. In Justine Rutland's absence as a Cabinet member for Tunbridge Wells Town and local areas, I will present this item. Tunbridge Wells Borough Council has received £1 million from the government as part of its UK Shared Prosperity Plan. And I'm going to hand over to David Canlon, Head of Economic Development and Property, to introduce the report. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The government launched the UK Shared Prosperity Fund in April 2022. It is an allocation rather than a competition, and as you've outlined, there's the potential for £1 million to be allocated to the borough. The programme operates over 3 financial years, from the current financial year 22-23 through to 24-25. The programme for Tunbridge Wells and nationally is heavily weighted towards the final year, with over 72% of the funding that will be available to the Borough Council in the 24-25 financial year. The programme is a mixture of capital and revenue funding. The government view it very much as a light touch, and the scope it covers is very flexible, and the government has reiterated that a number of times. The investment plan is attached to the report in appendices A to I on pages 105 to 145 of the agenda pack. With the terms of reference, the local partnership group is in the appendix J, pages 147 to 149 of the agenda pack. The investment plan sets out the local challenges and opportunities, and these are set out in the investment plan on pages 106 to page 113 of the agenda pack. There are then 3 themes that we are seeking to address. The UK Shared Prosperity Fund has themes related to community in place, supporting local business, and people and skills. We are then actually targeting interventions that are set out in the investment plan. In terms of community in place, this is on page 114. For local business, page 116, and people and skills, page 118. with outlines of the prospective projects that we are targeting under those different themes set out on pages, it's basically one-liners, but on projects are set out on pages 115, 117 and 120 of the agenda pack. We then go into a financial breakdown which is set out in appendices B and C on pages 130 133 with the indicative outputs and outcomes in some rather complex spreadsheets. They're on appendices D to I on pages 135 to 145. I'll leave it there, Chair. That sets out the main detail that is in the investment plan. I'll open it up to Cabinet.
Thank you, David. Does any member of Cabinet have any questions for David Cameron? No. Thank you. Does anybody wish to comment on the report? David, as an incoming administration, can I just thank you and your team who've had to work under a lot of pressure to have a huge list of projects that were submitted by different groups to try and organise them, cost them, for us to then come and decide which ones we thought we wanted to take together is in our partnership as our focus on 5. So thank you very much to you and your team for doing it under a very big time constraint.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I put the matter to the vote? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 13 is urgent business, and we have none. And finally, item 14, which is a date of the next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled to take place on Thursday, the 22nd of September 2022 at 6:30. And that meeting is part of the Cabinet on Tour, and that will be our third stop, and that will be in Paddock Wood. I'd like to thank everybody in the audience that came out tonight to take part in the meeting. We're going to have a quick comfort break, and then we're going to have our question and answer session with residents in about 5 or 10 minutes. So thank you very much. The meeting is now closed.